My first point is on the point you raised is the European Parliament speaks for the European Parliament, and without having to have a PhD in EU constitutional law, that's what that resolution represents. It's a view from the Parliament, and the Parliament is an important actor, of course, on trade law and our incentive schemes and our GSP+. My emphasis is on the GSP+ scheme as an incentive. It's not a stick, it's a carrot. I think Bangladesh is very well aware of the requirements to join GSP+, and I think you're well aware because I've said many times in public what they are, and the bottom line is meeting the requirements of 32 international conventions, which, as we all know, Bangladesh has now ratified, and they cover a huge range of issues: environmental, social, human rights, labour rights. And every country, it's a work in progress, and nobody expects perfection on day one of GSP+. So that work in progress, it's important to align that work in progress with our collaboration as an international partner of Bangladesh. And here I segue into some of the remarks I wanted to make. First of all, to congratulate CPD and the Embassy of Sweden on this excellent study. I must say, especially the recommendations provide a lot of food for thought, all of which is, of course, relevant, as I'm sure you said, Dr. Famander, in your remarks, relevant to GSP+ and the progress towards that. I think what I like about this study is that it encompasses not just big factories, which we're used to dealing with and engaging with, but also smaller and micro factories. And I guess some of the initial conclusions of the report aren't shock horror. I mean, it's perhaps no surprise that big factories are better at meeting some of the compliance requirements. But that then leads to the next question, which I think your report very well answers, which is how do we support others to reach those standards? Because GSP+ is about a country graduating, not about a sector or a factory. It's about the whole thrust of the country, the policy direction. And I think we all have a role to play in that. Of course, the Bangladesh government has a massive role to play in getting the regulation right, getting support to industry right, also not deterring technical assistance from abroad, which is quite critical to many of these issues. And we're certainly pushing on that door to try to ensure that even more technical assistance and engagement can happen from European countries. And I hesitate again to mention the European Chamber of Commerce, but it's almost tattooed on my forehead now, but it is on the way, it will help, and it will help not only EU business but also Bangladesh business. I think I visited a factory a couple of days ago, Deco, a very good factory, with our visiting director, Petros Ustubs, and I want to just recall why he was here. He was here to finalise our work towards a €400 million support on renewable energy to Bangladesh, and that's in the form of grants and loans, including a loan from the European Investment Bank. I think we as Europe want to be an actor in this field because it's a strategic issue for us. It's a strategic issue for Bangladesh as well, as we all try to work towards net zero, and I think you know that EU is by law committed to climate neutrality by 2050, and it will take a lot of effort domestically amongst our 27 member states to get there. And it's even more challenging for countries like Bangladesh, who have every right to build their industry and develop as they wish. But great to see that that can happen in the most green way possible, and I think we want to be a good partner on that. I also want to mention, and I think it's important, the issue of the green premium, because it's true that from Europe we have many more regulations coming down the line. We have the Circular Economy Action Plan, we have the textiles regulations, recycling, we have the due diligence legislation, which is now in a sort of tripartite negotiation amongst the Parliament, Council and Commission in our system, and lots of other mini legislation that could ultimately have implications for Bangladesh's industry and how you do business. But the question of the premium, the green premium, is a very important one, and I think it was great to see in the report, and again, thank you to Mr. Kamal for presenting it so well. It was great to see in the report there are some sort of mini premiums in terms of workers' health, where compliance is happening, and in terms of the overall approach of the factory. But I do think it's hard to avoid the issue of wages. It's hard to avoid the issue of wages and fair wages, and the brand's role in ensuring fair wages, because as has been mentioned by other speakers, we're now at a very pivotal moment for wages. 5 years since the last wage revision in the garment sector. 8,000 taka by any stretch of the imagination isn't a very healthy wage to live on, particularly if you have kids to feed. And I hope that we see something, something quite radical, frankly, to come out of the wage revision that will
reflect economic realities and the struggles of ordinary families here and you know, struggling as we are in the rest of the world. So the onus is not only on the government, the onus is not only just on the industry, it's also on brands and buyers. And there are excellent examples of real engagement and partnership amongst brands. And as we're in the good company of the Embassy of Sweden, I would cite the partnership between BGMEA and Ha-Meem Group, that's reducing greenhouse gas emissions across the value chain, decreasing the carbon footprint in the supply chain, and helping BGMEA facilitate the 30% reduction in greenhouse gases that you've mentioned by 2030. But that needs to be industry-wide, this kind of open partnership that means you can plan for the future and pay decent wages is important. And it also means that consumers in Europe have to wake up to the fact, at a difficult time, they need to pay more, because you know, we don't expect the money to magically appear out of the ether. It has to be something that keeps Bangladesh's industry competitive, gets a fair price in Europe, pays the workers well, and moves towards compliance. And it's a tricky mix, and no one's saying it's easy. We want to be as helpful as possible, both with financial funding and our GSP terms. But I think every part of that picture has to get its approach right and ensure that Bangladesh remains competitive, also diversifies its exports, and carries on the success story after graduation. So I could speak at length about the various bits of legislation approaching, but maybe you'd rather Google that than have me elaborate on all of them. But thank you for allowing me to intervene a little bit earlier than expected. Thanks, Farman. Exactly how the garment is produced, I think that's happening. And in the EU, I just see we're proposing a new labelling rules in this respect that will help aid transparency so that consumers can make an informed choice and know to what degree their product is compliant. And I believe the industry here is well aware of that legislation that's on the way. Thank you.